All of my aquariums over the years have always been in my living room, which has almost always been near my bedroom in the various apartments that I've been in. So running a silent tank has always been a super high priority for me. If you want to quiet your tank or you're in the planning stages and having a quiet tank is a high priority as well, please stay tuned. I always take noisiness into high regards when choosing equipment, so if it's not known for being silent, I won't even consider it. Thankfully, with the rise of DC pumps, Herbie or Bean Animal style overflows, and passively cooled LEDs, this has become much easier over the years. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the equipment I use and give you some tips on how you might be able to quiet your tank. In most of my videos, I run background music just to kind of keep it interesting. But in this video, I'm not going to run any, so you can kind of hear the tank as it is as I'm recording it. One of the greatest sources of noise from any tank is going to be the overflow system, whether it's a big tank with a drain going to a sump or an all-in-one nano. For a tank with an overflow box that leads to a sump, the quietest option to get the water to the sump is going to be a multi-drain system with a full siphon and at least one emergency drain that a small amount of water always trickles down. This would be your Herbie or Bean Animal style overflow system. The old Reef Ready style tanks with a single Durso overflow are almost always going to be super noisy since there's still a lot of air entering the overflow drain. It is possible to limit the noise from a Durso, but it's almost impossible to make it silent. The key to maintaining a full siphon overflow is going to be using a gate valve to dial in as close to a perfect siphon as possible, while always having just a very small amount of water entering the emergency drain. In an all-in-one tank, you don't have to worry about the sound of water entering a drain pipe, but you still have a lot of water that enters the weir and drops into the filter chamber. I will cover a little tip on how to quiet an all-in-one tank later when I cover my Pico tank.
You definitely want the main full siphon to be fully submerged underwater. I have two emergency drains. I have the main emergency drain that actually gets water going through it, fully submerged. I opted to have the secondary emergency drain above the water line, so if water does go through that, I can hear it, because water is not supposed to go through that. Basically, if water is going through that, both of the other return lines are clogged, so I want to know.
I typically don't run mechanical filtration. As you can see, sometimes I do put filter floss in there, but usually that's like once a week if I'm about to shoot a video or after a water change. At first, when I added the filter cups, it was a little bit noisy, so I bought these filter cup silencers. They actually made things worse, so I threw them out. But over time, biofilm kind of coated all the surfaces and it made it a lot quieter. If you run a lot of flow through your sump, there's going to be a lot of water passing through these filter cup sections if your sump has that. So that's why I like to run a lower flow rate, just because the water going through all the different compartments doesn't make a whole lot of noise. I don't really think you need a lot of flow through your sump in this day and age.
Actually, the two noisiest things on my tank are in my frag area. The fan on this light gets pretty loud when it heats up, and then the Nero 3 that I have down here is actually the loudest pump I have in my tank. And I think it's because I run it at full blast, so when it pulses I can hear it over everything else in the tank. Because it's under the tank and the doors are shut, it's not always that audible, but every now and then I hear it, and been thinking about swapping that thing out.
Another piece of equipment that could potentially create noise in your tank is your protein skimmer. You basically have a pump which pushes air violently through a water column and then is jettisoned back into the tank. Prior to my current Deltec 1000i skimmer, I had an AC driven JNS. It's the same as the Aquamax brand. It was one of the quieter AC driven skimmers on the market. I believe you could still buy it, but upgrading to the larger DC pump driven skimmer has quieted my setup even more. I chose Deltec because they're known for silent operation, and this one is no exception. I have to look at the reaction chamber neck to see if it's on or not, otherwise I can't really hear if it's running. It only gets noisy if a snail gets stuck in the volute. It drains at the bottom of the skimmer so it doesn't create surface tension, which some skimmers I think will pump the water above the water line. When picking a quiet skimmer, do your research. I would opt for a quality DC driven pump. So search around on the forums on recommendations for a quiet skimmer. AC return pumps can be pretty noisy, from just the pump itself running in addition to the vibration against the sump walls, other equipment, or rattling pipes. I think any quality DC pump is going to be more or less silent. Even those budget Chinese knockoff DC pumps are going to be pretty quiet. but the quality assurance isn't always as good as some of the other brands, so your mileage may vary. They may start quiet but get loud over time as they wear out. If you do run a DC pump at the upper ends of its flow rate, you're probably going to hear some noise. So I would recommend opting for an oversized return pump and then running it at a lower flow rate. I went with the largest current USA E-Flux pump, which is rated around 3,000 gallons per hour, but I have it running at about 35% and it's dead silent. You can dampen a noisy pump by running 6 to 12 inches of silicone tubing from the pump to the main return plumbing, which will absorb some vibration. And also adding some rubber feet or rubber mats can also reduce the vibration against surfaces in the sump. The bottom line, I think a quality DC pump dialed back should be damn near inaudible. In the age of LEDs, lighting should not contribute too much noise to your tank, but running multiple fixtures with cooling fans may accumulate to an annoying amount of noise. While fan-cooled LEDs are much quieter than the old metal halide or T5 fixtures that had to pump a lot of air through the system, there are passively cooled LED options out there that are going to be 100% silent. The fan on my Noopsy light under my tank is one of the louder pieces of equipment on my tank, while my 3 ATI Stratons over the top of the tank are completely silent. Over the past few years, there have been a lot more options for passively cooled lights like the ATI Stratons, the Philips Coral Care, the new AI Blades, and some of the other strip lights don't have fans. So all the passively cooled LEDs should be dead silent.
I run these two MP40s on the back wall, and I've been running them for a while. And if they're well maintained, they stay pretty quiet as long as you don't run like a pulse mode at 100%. One of them is quite old. I think it's when the Quiet Drive models first came out. And if I run that over 50% and kind of have a pulse mode on it or like the nutrient export mode, I can hear it. It's not crazy loud. It's kind of a low frequency, so it kind of blends in with the background a little better. But this one on this side is, I think I bought it 2 or 3 years ago, and I can crank that thing up really loud, even on pulse modes, and can barely hear it. When I clean them, I put on Molly Coat. It kind of is a lubricant that will keep them quiet and keep the vibration down. If you want the quietest tank possible, the go-to brand, and it has been the go-to brand for like 20 years for dead silent pumps, is Tunzi. So the one on the top here, this is a Tunzi 6105. It's one of their larger pumps meant for home aquariums, and I run that thing at 100% on a pulse mode, and the only noise it makes is the water rippling on the surface. Down at the bottom, I run the Stream 3, which is a huge pump, and I run it to keep the back of my tank nice and clean. That thing pumps water and is 100% silent. You can't hear it at full blast, even if you put your ear up to it. So while Tunzi pumps are a little bigger and more intrusive than some of the other pumps, they are dead silent, and they're about as reliable as it gets. As far as other wave makers go, like I said, the Nero 3 I found to be very noisy. I haven't used the 5 or the 7, so I don't know if they're less noticeable on the noise end, or maybe I just have a noisy old Nero. The max spec gyres, I've ran the 250 models and I've ran the 330 models, and I found them to be pretty quiet enough if they're cleaned, maintained, and kept under like 50-60%. I have noticed that high frequency whine on the higher end flow rates, and if they need to be cleaned, which they do often. So if you run those and you don't run them full blast, they can be pretty quiet. I will say that the Jabal pumps, I've had some that were pretty quiet, and I've had others that were super noisy, and I think those are hit or miss, just as the quality is. I don't think they have the quality assurance like some of the higher end pumps. So your mileage may vary, but just know that I personally think those J-Bow pumps will more often than not be noisy versus a higher quality pump. The two sources of noise in my tank that I find annoying but acceptable are going to be my auto top off and some of my dosing pump. Now there's no secret that the Tunzi Osmolator is the most reliable auto top up on the market, and it's been out forever, but it's also no secret that it's loud as hell. I can hear that thing go off in my bedroom in a dead sleep, so I usually just turn it off at night and turn it back on in the morning. Also, I run one of these old BRS dosers. I think that thing's like 10 years old. That thing is loud as hell, but I dose sodium nitrate with it. So I'm happy with that thing being loud because it only runs about 6 minutes a day. So I think 3 cycles of 2 minutes of dosing. I like that it's loud, so I know that it's still working. But if I ran anything more than that, if it came on every hour for like 10 minutes, then I would be pretty upset. I also use a Neptune dose for dosing my 2-part and have a Trident. Now both of these will contribute a little noise, but I guess I got lucky or others got unlucky in that my dose isn't very loud. If I'm sitting next to the tank, I can hear it in operation, but if the TV's on, the air conditioning is on, or any other noise source is on, I can't really tell. So it's not too bad. My Trident, it does make a little bit of noise, not crazy, but you will hear it kind of click and kind of ramp up here and there. The nice thing about that noisy pump is if the reservoir does run low, it's gonna be even louder. So that's good to know when I have to change out the auto top off water. I would be curious to try the new osmolator. Apparently the new pump on that thing is a lot quieter. This 3-gallon nano tank, when I first set it up, was actually louder than my 170-gallon tank. But it just goes to show you how quiet you can make a large tank. For this Pico tank, I chose a Kessel A80 because it is a fanless light. There's no fan that comes on. I did change out the return pump to one that's a little better quality and ended up being a lot quieter. The biggest source of noise has been this overflow. So I just put a sponge underneath the weir that the water falls onto. I don't want to block that, which can cause it to clog and overflow. So the flow into the weir is not impeded, but it catches the water to keep it quiet. I also do not run a flow pump in here to add extra noise. This is just a 3-outlet Pico tank. When I used to have this water box 20-gallon cube, I immediately ditched the return pump that came with it and opted for a small DC pump, which really quieted the tank and added a lot more flow. So if you do opt for one of these smaller nano tanks and it comes with a crappy little AC pump, I would opt for a small DC pump or possibly even a Seache Synchro pump that's pretty quiet, and they come in very small sizes. In addition to swapping out the return pump, I also added the sponge filter to the overflow like I did in this Pico tank, and this tank ended up being very, very quiet. Other things to consider is a new tank will be loud. The plumbing, the pumps, all those things need a little time to kind of break in. As bacterial films kind of grow over surfaces, and that film will kind of quiet water movement, and the pumps kind of will break in over time and noise will decrease. I think the opposite is true with LED fans. If the bearings or any other parts on those fans kind of rust, they're going to get loud and clunky. Hopefully this video has been helpful. If you have any other tips to keep a tank quiet, please comment below. I'm always looking for ways to make my tank quieter or future projects quieter.